This tale of a haunting takes place in a town which some call the sweetest place on earth. Hershey, Pennsylvania is well known for its famous chocolate bars and candies, and also for its amusement park, but some know very little about the horrors which take place in this small American town. I recently interviewed a close friend to the family who has worked at numerous locations in Hershey, and who has, at times, got the scare of his life while working around the clock. My first story begins with a middle-aged man who we are going to call Jim. Jim had been working security for Hershey Company for some time and worked various shifts around the factories, the amusement park itself, and also the old theater. Soon, Jim would be finding himself working nights at the Hershey Theater, which was constructed in September 1933, during a campaign which would defy the Great Depression. One particular night, Jim was doing his security checks in the old 1904-seat theater when he noticed a life-sized cardboard cutout of some celebrity standing in the middle of the aisle. Very strange, considering Jim was the only employee who was in that building that night. I had walked down that main hallway about 15 minutes earlier that morning, and I would have walked right into it and knocked it over. For something so odd, it made me kind of laugh a bit. Jim also felt as if someone had followed him in. Maybe he forgot to lock the doors after he went to go inside and do his checks. After I placed a cardboard celebrity stand-up back behind the stage with some of the other props, I got some chills up my spine. Jim also began to get the impression that he was being watched. Backstage, months went by as Jim continued working nights at the Hershey Theater. A couple of his employees had in the past experienced a few things here and there that were deemed to be ghosts and spirits. We would all agree on the sounds of footsteps. Some nights it sounded as if the place was packed with an audience. Like there was a big show going on, but there wasn't. And the place was closed at 2 or 3 in the morning. Jim shrugged as he lit a cigarette and took a hard drag. His expression slowly changed from a smile to a frown. This one night I was going backstage to do some of my checks. I always got a sinking feeling in my stomach going up those steps. Kind of like I shouldn't be going up there. I then checked one of the 3 rooms up there carefully and moved on. I get inside this one room and switch the light on, and there it is. Jim told me, froze in a complete shock at the sight of a man standing up on the chair on the other side of the room. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and at the same time, I couldn't take my eyes off of it. The vibe I got from this man was not good. I could feel complete dread and misery. She was lying down and sobbing. At the time, I wouldn't believe I was seeing this. The apparition of the young woman looked up to him. Suddenly, to Jim's horror, he witnessed the man who was furious reach up for a noose and wrap it around its neck. The ghost of the young crying lady began to reach out to the man when the chair of the enraged spirit was standing on kicked out beneath him. Jim had enough time to see the man hanging himself and witness his arms and legs reach and kicking out. I thought I was going to die of a heart attack, but sure enough, I hauled ass out of there. It took me enough time to get over what happened that night. Even though it was my job to check things out in that old theater, I sure as hell wouldn't go up in that room. Also, I thought about quitting, but then again, who would be paying the bills? A few of us knew the place was haunted, but the other employees didn't seem to care. Jim laughed and wondered if the ones who thought the place was spirit-free actually went inside to do some security checks. When I had asked him about what he had witnessed that one horrid night, he just went into a zone, and his tone changed. I have no idea what it was all about, but I know one thing. The chair that that apparition was standing on was real, because it was something I used to see when I checked that room out. It was scary how that chair kicked out from under that man's feet. It was like it was all too real. Oh, you know, at the moment I was pretty much scared out of my wits, but from what I remember, it appeared to be classic attire people. Things people would wear in the 30s to 50s. One thing that really stands out and scares me is that evil expression on that dude's face. He was radiating pure evil from that look. Jim went on with his ghost stories about the haunts in Hershey, and told me about a group of contractors who were doing some work in the ground below the level corridor. Unknown to the contractors were rumors of ghosts and spirits roaming that long stretch of hallway and elevator, which had a mind of its own. When a few of the men would be leaving or arriving, the elevator would just randomly go on certain floors, its doors opening as if someone was getting off or getting on. The last day, this particular group of contractors would be walking down in that corridor before they all quit. They said that they saw the ghostly apparition of an Indian standing at the distance, glaring at them. Jim explained to me that they had quit that day altogether, left their tools down there, and never returned. During the day, in the sunshine, Hershey Park is echoed with cheer and laughter. But what of the night, when the park is empty and silence fills the darkness? It's reported that the park's carousel turns on by itself late at night and into the early morning hours. Also, there are 2 reports of accidental deaths involving 2 of the park's roller coasters. The Comet, a wooden roller coaster which was built in the late 40s. A maintenance worker was killed when he fell to his death after inspecting and repairing sections of the Comet coaster in the early hours of dawn. It's said that his spirit is sometimes seen roaming around where he met his fate. Hope you guys enjoyed, and happy haunting. Till next time. My family moved to Pennsylvania when I was in 6th grade. About 2 years after moving, I was woken up in the middle of the night by someone saying my name. It was a man's voice that I had never heard before, speaking from directly next to my head. He wasn't shouting or trying to get my attention, he just said my name. It woke me up in a panic, and as I looked around the room, I did not see anyone there. I managed to convince myself that it was just a trick of my mind. Sometimes we hear things that aren't really there, and went to sleep. Nothing happened for a while. I can't exactly remember how long. Then, the exact same thing happens again. It was the same voice, the same way. I thought it was strange and suspected it might be a ghost of some kind, but decided that if all it was doing was saying my name, that it wasn't going to do any harm to me, so I went back to sleep. It happened a few times over the next few years. The incidents had nothing in common. There was no set amount of time between them. They just seemed to be completely random. I spent half of the time thinking I dreamed it all up, and the other half of the time wondering what this personal ghost wanted. That he kept waking me up in the middle of the night and disappearing. Around 11th grade, my father remarried and my step-family moved into our home. The room next door to mine, where my older brother had lived before moving out, was given to my stepsister, who kept very late hours even on school nights. I took to sleeping with earplugs to block the noise from her room. Since then, I did not hear that voice. I began to believe in it more and more, supposing that my earplugs prevented me from hearing him. I didn't think too much about it, and began to forget about the strange nightly visits. I was accepted to college and left to live in the dorms. After a few weeks, I came home on the weekend for a visit. My sister immediately asked me if I was aware that our house was haunted. Surprised, I asked her why she said that, and she said that ever since I had left for college, she had started hearing footsteps at night in my room and down the hall. At first, she thought that she was just dreaming them. Then, her boyfriend stayed over and he heard it too. There was never anyone there when they checked. But every day for a week, they heard it, like someone walking around my room looking for something. and then walking down the hall. That night I tried to sleep without my earplugs, but I didn't hear the voice. I think he stayed with me all through high school, although I did not hear him. And when I went to college, he got lonely and went to find me. Since then, neither I nor my stepsister have heard the ghost. I can only assume that he moved on when he couldn't find me anymore. I'm 48 years old. I always considered myself a sensitive since a young child. However, the experiences have gotten fewer as I have aged. Perhaps I've become more cynical and stoic in the years. Or I am just not as open as I used to be. I don't know. But I have had numerous experiences. Since I just found this site, I will start with a brief one, and maybe we'll share more detailed and scarier ones later. When I was about 17, I remember it was early March. It was one of those nights where there was both a light fog and a spitting rain. My best friend had his own car, a baby blue Ford Pinto, and a putt-putt car at best. If we had money for gas, we would drive around on Friday nights, doing nothing in particular but listening to the radio and talking. Occasionally we smoked some pot. We picked up one of our girlfriends, who was usually able to get a joint from her older sister, this night being no exception. But I want it to be known we had not smoked anything before this event. We were not on a dark country road, but a common thoroughfare where there was normal traffic in front and behind us, traveling 35 to 40 miles an hour. Karen was newly sat in the backseat, pretty much still saying her hellos and how are yous, etc. I was in the passenger seat. Jack was very careful when he drove, almost always driving too slow. Suddenly, in the road ahead, was what looked like a baby, half wrapped in a pale pink blanket, blood smeared across its face. I would have guessed it was about 10 months old, having come up upon it so suddenly though. The vague mist and rain in the road, we simply glided right over it. There were no bumps heard under the car or anything. It happened so quickly. A few seconds of disbelief, I dare to say. Did you see that? After all, maybe it was just me who saw it. Jack was silent. Karen asked, "What?" "Did you see what was in the road?" I asked. Jack finally croaked, "I'm not even gonna say what I think it was." Karen was still pressing. What? I didn't see anything." "It looked like a dead baby," I said finally. Karen laughed and repeated, "What?" I told Jack to turn around immediately, but he didn't, and still didn't concur with me on what it was in the road. He took a long way around the main highway and through the back neighborhoods to get back to the original spot. We were only past the site for about 15 minutes total before we returned. I was terribly impatient to get back there, and was annoyed that Jack, who I believe was just too terrified, so he purposely didn't turn around despite my pleading. We reapproached. I expected to see another car stopped, an ambulance, anything to prove that we just witnessed a baby dead in the road, as if it had been tossed out a car window or thrown into oncoming traffic from the roadside. There was nothing. I expected bloodstains, tire marks, people gathered. Nothing. We even went around again, but there was no sign of anything unusual occurring at that spot in the road. I scanned the sides of the road. Nothing. Not even a baby blanket. We did smoke the joint, but that just made the experience more heightened, and in my head at least. "It was probably just a possum," Jack said. "No, it wasn't. It was distinctly what we saw it was. Besides, if it was a dead possum, it would still be there. Dead. Worse, flattened." The subject was dropped between us. But I scoured the newspapers for weeks looking for anything that might tell of this incident. I went back there myself, and there was never a sign of anything. But I had always wondered about the house just near that spot that sat back from the road. a dirty, unkept place that looked like it was split into several apartments. I think someone once said that it was a halfway house for young girls in trouble. I never checked it out for a fact, though. If it was indeed a murder or an abortion or whatever, certainly someone else would have seen it. There were so many cars traveling right over it as we did. Maybe by reading this, someone else will come forward. For years as I drove past that point on the road, I still wonder. I still do today. Jack and I are still friends, middle-aged men now, yet we have rarely talked about it again until just recently. We recalled the incident, sharing the story with some friends around Halloween time, and we were in complete agreement that we saw that missing night was a dead baby in the road. This happened around 1953 in Upper Dublin Township, Pennsylvania, at the Fitzwater Cemetery, Twining Road. This cemetery has a large stone wall around it about 4 to 5 feet tall. I was riding my horse past that cemetery as I was heading for home like I normally do. I lived up the hill from that cemetery, about 500 yards. In the woods, my horse was always skittish going past that cemetery around dusk. This evening, she was especially skittish, and had her ears up, her body and head turned, and was sidestepping. I looked over at the cemetery, and I saw a young lady sitting on the favorite big tombstone everyone likes to sit on. This young lady waved to me, so I waved back. I smiled and yelled over to her, "Hi." She smiled back. As we watched her raised hand start to evaporate at the top and continued down her arm, and then the rest of her just slowly vanished. Well, this raised the hairs on the back of my neck and goosebumps ran all over my spine. We crossed the road quickly, and up the dirt bank. I turned my horse towards home and we ran the rest of the way. Since then, we would give that cemetery a wide path, and my horse was still always skittish going past. But we never saw the young girl after that. I'd like to start this off by saying I'm not a firm believer in the paranormal. Until these accounts occurred, I was blissfully ignorant to any supernatural phenomena. Also, there is roughly a 3-year gap between two connecting points in this story. About 6 years ago, I attended a class trip to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I was about 14 years old at the time. We departed for the trip from Rochester, New York at about 7 a.m. After a long bus ride, and some rather embarrassing photos later, we arrived at our hotel. For we were staying 2 days and 1 night. My roommates, Matt, Eric, and Josh, began unpacking as I made plans to sneak in some girls from across the hall later in the night. The schedule for the day, however, included lunch and a museum, followed by a ghost walk in the woods. After the ghost walk, we were going to go and hear history of some hotel at the main strip. The day proceeded relatively normal. That is, until we walked down Pickett's Charge and into the woods for the tour. I walked up this hill with my friend Eric and Casey on either side of me and looked down at the woods, roughly 150 yards away at this point. Our group of about 20 people was following behind us. I clearly saw a young girl with long black hair and a white nightgown in the tree line. She had a dazed but happy expression on her face. But what scared me was her rather elongated fingers and sharp nails. Apparently, I had stopped in my tracks and stared at it for too long because my friends were asking what the hell was wrong with me. I shook it off as nothing and continued down the hill. The figure disappeared as soon as I looked away. Our group went into the woods and heard some bland, generic stories from historians and locals. Preceding that, we got to the hotel for the next lecture. They seated all of us in the basement, which had chairs arranged. This basement was by no means finished, It had the original stone foundation and wood ceiling. Seated beside me was Eric, to my left, closest to the wall. The hotel staff began speaking about the eerie history of the place. About 15 minutes in, Eric was looking nervous. He didn't respond when I asked him what was wrong. But he was fine again minutes later. We left the area and went back to our hotel as it was 11 p.m. Eric and I met back up with the rest of our roommates and proceeded to our room. As the long night went on, I was sitting under the window. Eric was laying on a bed, and Matt, I believe, was passed out in the tub. At this time, Eric looked at me with the most terrified expression I had ever seen anyone give. This, along with the other episode back at the basement, led me to intensively question what his deal was. Refusing to give an answer, he got furious with me and told me he was going to bed. The rest of the trip continued rather normal. It wasn't until years later that I had to deal with one of the most terrifying realizations of my life. 3 years after Gettysburg, Eric, my father, and I were messing around with a Ouija board in my kitchen. We really wanted to see something cool, so we had candles, power off, and phones off. The works. My father left us alone after about 20 minutes into the session, as he had somewhere to go. Eric and I continued until about 1 a.m. when Eric's phone started vibrating. Mind you, his phone was off. He began to freak out and started saying, "It's happening again," along with some other serious cursing. We couldn't turn his phone back on or stop the vibrating for an unsettling 5 minutes. When it finally stopped, we heard a loud bang in the attic. Now, I don't have the average horror movie attic with stairs leading up to it. It's really just a crawl space, with the only access point being a hole in the ceiling of the garage. Both of us knew we'd have to check it out if we were ever going to get any sleep that night. So, we closed the Ouija board and went into the garage, and I climbed up to take a look into the attic. As Eric was in no condition for anything else even remotely spooky, nothing, absolutely nothing was up there. Not a creature or even anything stored. What the hell made those unexplained noises? I wake up in the morning and started making coffee, trying to brush off the night before. Eric came into the kitchen minutes later with an uncomfortably solemn look on his face. "We need to talk." Finally, at this point, I got to hear the connecting point. That night back in Gettysburg, I saw something in the basement of that hotel. I saw these long fingers with sharp nails slowly caressing the window pane from the outside. My heart began to race. When I tried to make sure I wasn't seeing things, my phone started vibrating, but the battery was out of it, and it was in my other pocket. A strong surge of anxiety poured over me as he went on with his explanation. "Remember when we were back at the hotel afterwards, and me and you had that argument? I saw something behind you. In the window. A little girl in a white nightgown with long black hair. And she looked pissed." "What?" I responded with in my stupor. He continued, "The morning after I saw that in the window, I woke up with 3 long bloody scratches under my shirt, from my neck to my waist, that were hot to the touch." I thought I knew what he was going to show me next, but I wish I hadn't. He lifted up his shirt, revealing 3 long bloody scratches from his neck to his waist. He insisted I feel them, burning hot to the touch, in the middle of February. To this day, I still think I can see her out of the corner of my eye, lingering near wooded areas. Ghouls, I hope you enjoyed these stories from my home state, Pennsylvania. I had to throw a Gettysburg in there, of course. Also, a Hershey Park. Yes, please, I had to. I did hear quite a bit of things do happen in that theater. Gettysburg, obviously. Cemeteries are pretty spoopy around here because they're really old cemeteries, and they're cemeteries from like mining towns and stuff, because there's a lot of mining towns, especially in northeast Pennsylvania, which is around where I live. And a lot of times the people who are buried in there from long ago are passed from, mining incidents and like black lung and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a bunch of crap in Pennsylvania, but I hope you ghouls enjoyed it. Do I have a secret word of the day? Black Friday. I went out and holy Jesus. I don't know why they call it Black Friday, because I went yesterday. So it's like Black Thursday now? I don't get it. But anyway, yeah, if you guys follow my Snapchat, you know all the crap I went through to get my kid the one present that he really wanted this year. So yeah. But as always, the last video will be on the top left, the next video will be on the bottom left. All my social medias are on the screen as well as in the description box below. And remember, there's always someone or something watching you.